Today in Real Garage, I'm unscrewing my track bar project that I screwed up on Season 3, Episode 4. So just as a review, I'm running a quick change rear end in this project, which is presenting some clearance problems. My original plan was to extend the track bar mounts and run the track bar behind the rear end and the fuel cell. But I didn't calculate for the bolt mounts, and I was going to have some clearance problems during excessive rear end movement. So I had to back up and punt and run the track bar up and over the rear end. The original track bar was straight. Now it's got a big bend in it. So obviously it's not going to be long enough. So today I'm making a new track bar. Normally I use 1¼ by 1/34 wall DUM tubing for the track bar. But because of the bend, I'm opting for the 156 wall tubing for added strength. I also need to make some new threaded inserts or turn these down to fit the thicker tubing. These will be used for my bushings and heim joints. Here's my current problem. I don't bend 1¼ tubing that often, so I don't have a die set for my tubing bender. Here's a real project on how I'm going to handle this. I'm naming this project Die in Die, or maybe Die Squared. I don't know. Either way, a die set is about $550 shipped. As much as I'm going to use it, it's probably not going to be worth it. So my philosophy is, why not try to make something myself? My idea is to make a sleeve to fit the tubing that I need to bend. I have an 1 5/8 die, so I need an 1 5/8 tubing with a 1/8/7 wall thickness to give me an inside diameter of 1¼ inch. My thought is to bend this tube around the whole die and then cut it in half. Before pulling the tube out of the die, I'm marking the center line on top and bottom, also where I need the trim cut to length. Because the tube has a little spring back, I need to push it into the die as I go around marking it. So full disclosure, the first time I tried to do this, I broke the die. You might have noticed all the additional welds on it. And that's because it snapped the 1-inch solid steel pull bar clean off the die. It was originally MIG welded, and it barely penetrated the 2-inch thick die. So I ground off all the cold welds, beveled the joints, and did a triple pass TIG weld using ER80SD2 filler metal. And then I made some 1/2-inch thick gussets and double pass welded those. The push bar mount had the same problem, so I cut it off and repeated the process. For this thicker material, it should have been preheated first for it to even have a chance of penetrating properly. Or use the spray, or better yet, pulse MIG process. I did all of these TIG welds with the Multimatic 220 AC/DC. I'm using the bandsaw to cut the ends, but that isn't going to work to cut the full length in half. This bandsaw is never going to make a straight cut through both of these sides of the tube. Usually, the bottom one will start walking to the side. So that means I'm using the plasma cutter to rip this thing in half. Warning. Read and follow all labels and your owner's manuals. I'm using the Spectrum 375 plasma cutter set to 25 amps. And the Filter 130 to help eat the plasma smoke. Okay, the curved one is obviously for the die, and the follower bar gets the straight one. Now it's clean up the dross from the cut area and the soot that's inside here. The dross comes up pretty easy when you hit it. Then some smoothing of the cut areas with the large disc sander. And final fitting into the dies. My goal is to have them fit evenly with the edges of the dies. I got these things fitting nicely in the dies. And I also want to show you this little modification. I welded a little tab on the end of the sleeve, because when the die is in motion, it's pulling this way, and the force is against the sleeve in that direction. So this little tab will prevent it from slipping. I did the same thing to the straight sleeve, except on the opposite end, because this die is going in this direction. Now I can get back to fixing my track bar. All right, let's see how this works. Oh, I also made this little sleeve here for the tubing clamp. That will help make sure that the tubing starts bending in the same spot. Makes it consistent, repeatable. All right, I'm making this bar a little bit longer and then just trimming the ends. I also made this little bend gauge to get the shape that I need. Should end up being about 35 degrees. Oh, we got a ways to go. Been in this heavy wall tube like nothing. That's good. Okay, like I said earlier, I'm using this 1¼ inch by 0.156 thick DOM tubing, which is quite a bit thicker than the 083, 95, or even the 120 wall tubing I normally use. Which means the threaded bungs that we make for the bushings and heim joints need to be turned down quite a bit. I'm shooting for about 15/16, which is 0.9375, or maybe even a tick less to slip inside the tube. That's it. All right, one more to go. To make setting the length of my new bar easier, I tack welded some old bolts to the table using the mock-up bar. Perfect length for the new bar. After I cut and bevel the ends of the new bar, I'm taking some 100 grit emery cloth to clean off the mill scale from my weld area. One of the things I like to do is plug weld the body of my threaded bungs about a ½ inch down the tube. This requires 2 1/4-inch holes on each end. I'm tacking the bungs in first, then TIG welding them all the way around using ER80SD2 filler metal. I've got my Multimatic 220 set for DC and 160 amps, which I'm managing with the wireless foot control. A little joint prep and some crude fixturing will make this weld experience a lot better. Now let's get to the plug welds. I've got the Multimatic auto set to MIG steel 3/16, which is pretty hot. I do this on my bars because I've seen some of these crack or break around the weld, either from an impact or severe duty like road course racing. If that happens, the threaded slug will slide right out, and these plug welds will give me some extra insurance. Nice. Sometimes, if you do your plug weld right, you might even penetrate into the threads. So I'm just re-tapping them. Yep, and this one feels like it did a little bit. Okay. Let's verify the length on this thing and get it back in the car. Excellent. All right, this should fit if my mock-up bar and measurements were correct. All right, for this thing to be centered, my plumb bob to axle face measurement needs to be 9.5 inches. And it is. All right, one heavy-duty, race-ready track bar installed. Next time on Real Garage, I'm still playing with my rear end. I'll show you a universal mounting solution.